Hello, everyone. We are back with our June monthly roundtable, all things real estate in Toronto and Vancouver. And we're back with our favorite panel. My co host, John Pasalis of Realosophy Realty, is here in Toronto. Hi, John.
Hello again.
And always our favorite guest, Steve Saretsky, out in Vancouver with Oakwin Realty. How are you doing, Steve?
Doing all right. Surviving. Hanging in.
Yeah.
I'm just going to step in and say we just realized before the show that this is officially the third year that we've been doing the roundtable, which kind of time flies, but it's pretty amazing. So June, I think we started June 2022, so it's pretty wild.
Yeah. We figured
Wait,
that
when
out
did we start? It's been 3 years?
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
June 2022. Yeah,
Wow.
it's
Was
crazy.
that
Yeah.
was that with our old friend originally? Or was he
No, I
before
don't
that?
think so because
No,
he was
you
doing something
started
else.
earlier. Yes.
We
So we
started
took
with
over the
Jesse
format.
Bains
Yes.
before, but
Mhm.
then I think they stopped around 2022, and then we just started doing it on our channel. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Urmi going strong.
Actually, we figured it out because I had somehow brought up our June 22 notes.
And she's
Oh,
I
like,
was
"What
really?
are
like,
these notes? This doesn't look
John was
familiar."
like, John, what kind of notes are these? So,
I know.
yeah, going strong, time flies, and times change too. So let's just get right into it. John, I thought we'd just start with your latest tweet here. Toronto's spring housing market is dead on arrival. More homes sold in May 1996 than in May 2025.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is a sluggish market. I mean, this is, especially, I mean, I was referring to detached homes in those stats, and if we look at the past 4 months, this is the fourth month in a row where detached home sales have been their lowest in 30 years. It's kind of mind-blowing to think that we had more detached home sales 30 years ago in the mid 90s than we have today. Given our population boom, obviously, we built more detached homes, but yeah, I mean, it kind of shows you just how low sales volumes are relative to historic trends. Condo sales are about a 20-year low. Again, both of these are outside of COVID. I mean, I think COVID was probably a bit lower during the lockdowns, April, May. Outside of that, yeah, super sluggish sales volumes. Uh, Prices are down year over year, but I feel like that's a kind of a misleading indicator because we saw a slight rally last spring in April, May, June. And then, July, August, prices dipped again. So since around August last year, prices have actually been pretty flat, both for low rise and for houses. So, people on the ground, I don't think are seeing this translate into, and of course, there are some outliers, some units, some condos are a little bit low, but at an aggregate level, it's not like prices are plummeting. Prices are kind of stable, which is just fascinating given how soft the market is, how low sales are, how high inventory is, both for houses and for condos. It's just fascinating to see this stability. And I can't remember. I think I talked about this with Ron Butler. I was on his show a little while ago. I was acting like, when does it break? And, potentially unemployment. I think if we see more stress in the job market, people need to sell, we might see prices dip. But anyhow, it's fascinating that we're kind of at
Which
this point.
which price metric are you looking at?
So, and I'm looking at average prices year over year. Year over year, we're down about 7%. But since around August or September, our average prices have pretty much been flat. Like low rise has bounced around up and down around 1.3. Condos, I think, are around 700. So they've bounced around a little bit, but they've been within a reasonable margin. So we're not down very much. How are things over there?
Yeah, I mean similar trend. Basically, it's funny. I just put out a tweet there. So Vancouver housing data, fewest home sales in 2 decades outside of the 2020 lockdowns. So again, May 2020, right? We're kind of just like early on in the lockdowns. So if you kind of strip that month out, it was more than a 20-year low in home sales across all property types and standing inventory right now. So if you just look at the resale market, the condo market, standing inventory for sale, it's the highest levels of inventory we've seen in 15 years. You'd have to go back to, I think it was like September 2012, I believe, was the last time we had this number of listings available on the MLS for the condo segment. So Yeah, there you go. Basically 20-year lows and 15-year highs in inventory.
Wow. And how are prices doing?
You know, it's just a funny thing is, right? Because everyone goes, even to your point, I think you know this, but like every, person that will comment on YouTube or whatever, like the first thing is like, what's happening with prices? And I think it's hard to like measure home prices on like a month to month or several month basis. Because it's like, I think what you see is like you're in like this illiquid market, and you'll see a lot of properties that will transact at okay, reasonable prices, and then you'll see the odd person that just like hammers their price because that's the only bid they get and they need to get out. So you have these illiquid markets, and you get the odd motivated seller. It just like sets sort of that price lower. But if you look at overall, it's interesting, right? And this is where I say, like, I think there's some nuances here, but if you look at the median sales price, detached was down 8% from last year. Condos were down 4. But like, I don't know, from what I'm seeing, like most people will look at that and say, "Oh, the detached market's worse than the condo market." I don't really think that's accurate. I think that what you see is like, at least in the detached segment, is like, yeah, you might see like the $5 million houses are not moving, and so like if you want to trade them, they trade at 4.5. But I think if you look at the general market, as I think like the condo market, in my opinion, is undoubtedly much weaker than the single family market.
Yeah, the detached stats can get a little skewed average because they obviously have a much broader range of prices. So, if you have
Yeah.
like more high-end home sell or
And it's
fewer.
hard too, is you think of like a detached, right? Like every single house, like at least in Vancouver, like every house on the block will be like very different. There's all these unique characteristics, and they can be harder to price, especially as you get into like the $3 million range, where there becomes like a lot of unique attributes. Whereas you think about like a condo, like you have a high generic high rise where every floor plan is basically the same. It's pretty easy to price things out, and so you get it's a lot easier to sort of figure out pricing on a month to month basis in that segment. So that's kind of what I would say. I think there's definitely some nuances there. John, I was kind of curious, just to your earlier point, like looking at single family home sales, and like, yeah, they're obviously really weak, but I'm like, I kind of wonder like how much of that is just is like a part of just, we just don't really build single families today. We're not really adding, like in Vancouver anyways, we don't add net new inventory of single family houses. Every single year, the number of homes available contracts. Like the stock will actually shrink as you take these houses and package them up into like land assemblies.
So I think the sales numbers, I think probably have more. I mean, there's a few things what's interesting in Toronto. The sales numbers I think are soft because of economic conditions. To your point, I don't think we're seeing fewer stock of homes because of land assemblies. Like what's largely happening in the GTA is like the number of homes that are kind of I'm not in many cases, like when people move out of their homes, they just keep them and rent them. And then they move into their upsize home. Or if it's like the family home and the parents pass away or they need to move on, the kids keep it, right? So you end up with a lower stock of homes because more of them are being rented. So the number of rentals are surging, but the demand isn't necessarily declining. Like sales have been going up for the most part, but there's just fewer to choose from. So right now, I think it's just purely economic conditions more than anything. I think just people are sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that a lot of people that would typically purchase a single family house are stuck with condos that they can't sell in order to upsize.
Yeah.
I can certainly think of a few clients that are, in that situation today,
Even,
that, they want to move and they want to upsize, but it's like, well, I've got a subject to sale clause and my condo's not selling.
I find it's like condo owners for sure, but even low-rise homeowners, like people who have like a small starter home, I think are in the same position in Toronto. They want to upsize, but on the other hand, they're worried what's their home going to sell for? Is it going to sell? The market's dead. Then they also don't want to sell their home first because they're wondering how long it's going to take them to find a home to buy. They want to move into a short-term rental. So those people are a little bit frozen somewhat. It's kind of only the ones that needs to move that are doing it. So I think it's all of those. I think it's all upsizers are kind of moving to the sidelines.
Yeah, makes sense.
And to clarify, both of you are speaking about resale numbers there, correct?
Yeah.
Those are resale trends. So now let's turn to another part of the market. We're seeing a lot of headlines in Toronto. We saw seventh consecutive month of record all-time lows for new home sales in the GTA, eclipses 1990s downturn. So the 1990s at the start, John, while we may have seen sales still kind of gaining a little bit, started with that huge recession.
Mm-hmm.
And that resulted in a lot of if totally frozen market. I remember my own family being really affected by that in the suburbs. And interestingly, first I want to talk about that, John, but then there's a second story here that Toronto area subdivisions are flooded by single family home rentals.
Mm.
So, how do these two storylines connect? First, a bit of a confusion. When they say these are record all time low sales, do they mean houses still on spec, or do they mean standing, like even sales of standing inventory, homes that are there to be bought?
No, I think what you're talking about general, I'm pretty sure they're referring mainly to pre-construction sales. I think that's what those Altus stats are, right, Steve? I don't think they're existing built inventory, but I could be wrong. But
I think they would track. So, like, to my understanding, I could be wrong here. I think if you have, let's say, a condo developer builds a tower, it's brand new, but the building is completed, but they've got 30 units left over that they never pre-sold. I think once those trade, those would be considered a new home sale.
okay, so then it concludes both pre-construction and standing inventory.
To
Um,
clarify, I think it was a report from the BILS, the Building Industry and Land Development Association, saying that there were 310 new home sales in the region in the GTA, down 72% from April 2024 and 89% less than the 10-year average. Now, as for whether this is, I think, one thing we don't quite get as an average consumer. Is it encompassing both those on paper and those sitting there?
yeah.
Because, yeah, I would assume it's both there.
Yeah, it seems like it's both. It probably, now that you say it, it probably makes sense that it's both. And again, a lot of this is just no one's buying pre-construction or new construction, basically. The prices are significantly above resale, especially for condos. Similarly for low rise, low rise builders may have more flexibility to make changes. But yeah, I mean, I think this is why it's frozen. I mean, there's a big disconnect between what builders are charging. Prices fell, the resale prices fell 20% or so from the peak. And new home prices aren't adjusting to that new reality, which is why they're frozen, right? Whereas resale prices have adjusted.
So this leads to an interesting issue. If it's houses on spec sitting there, that's hurting developers. But if this also includes standing inventory, as well as other subdivisions which have been partially bought into, that affects end users and speculators, I would think as well. It starts to spill over. And so I turn again to the second headline: Toronto area subdivisions flooded by single family home rentals. And we have the CEO of Minto Group, who's a prominent builder in this area, saying that rental investors are more rare in the detached new house market compared to condos. But what I'm suspecting here is that buyers who bought in the boom early 2021 and 2022 are now taking delivery of their single detached homes as rentals. In many cases, they have been speculating based on the resale market, but they are not seeing the prospect to resell the home at a premium to what they paid. I feel like this is a new dynamic. In the 1990s, when the suburbs exploded in Toronto and that downturn hit a lot of people who had just upsized
Mm-hmm.
from their modest homes and went out in that big push to the McMansions, they got hit. But this is a different dynamic, it seems, John.
Well, yeah, huge. So the article you're talking about was in the Globe. I just saw it a couple days ago.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, during the boom, everyone thinks of like investors buying condos, which obviously they do. But during the boom, at least in Toronto, I don't know what Vancouver's like, they were all flooding to the suburbs to buy townhomes, and semis and detached homes, and we've joked about this on our own show, but our former housing minister, Ahmed Hussein, was one of those people just like loading up on condos in the suburbs of Ottawa, and
Townhouses. I
framing.
think townhouses,
Sorry,
not condos.
townhouse. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, loading up on townhomes in suburban Ottawa, arguing that he's solving the housing crisis by padding up his investment portfolio. And yeah, I mean, I think this is, I mean, obviously it creates problems because fewer people can buy those. But yeah, the stats on those are insane. Like the prices that people paid, you know, if you think that the math on condos doesn't look good, with houses it's even worse. They're bleeding cash. And the reality is, I mean, and I can say this because we work in the industry, when you look at the rental profile of someone who's renting downtown condo is generally very good. You know, usually one or two incomes, solid jobs, works at Google, or like really good jobs, great profile. The people who are renting homes in the distant suburbs are people who would love to buy a home but can't qualify because they have terrible credit, they don't have good income, or any variation of those. So the tenant profile isn't great. So as in, you know, people are just basically buying them because housing was just seen as this get rich quick scheme. And now I think a lot of those investors are going to be struggling. And I think that's actually, I've been thinking about that. That's kind of like the one story that no one's talked about, like this surge of investors in these suburbs, because they're going to be just as impacted as the downtown condo buyers, I think, in the next couple of years.
And let me just tease out a little bit, John, of what you're saying. So you've been really critical of using investment to, build our housing stock. Here's an example again where you can say investment money has led to more homes being built, right? In these GTA suburbs, because we're talking about new homes.
Mhm.
But here's the issue, and I'm wondering if this what is makes it potentially more dangerous than 1990s. When the 1990s, the suburbs got hit with a massive real estate downturn. Remember, there was a collapse of banks in the United States that spilled over. Both economies were in a terrible recession. A
Mhm.
lot of people could not hold on to these homes because they had upsides to them, but they
Mhm.
were end users.
Mhm.
So they had to sell a little bit underpriced. And, a lot of people had to work
Mhm.
for years to recover from that mess. Is it more dangerous now? Because
Uh,
we have added to this people who are going into this economic downturn because of the tariffs south of the border and uncertainty already over leveraged.
I think it is riskier. I mean, I don't know what Steve thinks, but I think a lot of these people have loaded up on debt. When I talk to people and I hear like how much debt they have relative to their income and their rents, and I like my head wants to explode. I'm like, what are you people doing? Like, you know, it is very risky. I mean, it's your point. Listen, I don't think the investors have resulted in more supply. I mean, I'll challenge that. At the end of the day, you believe that narrative if you think no one wanted to buy that suburban townhome in Ottawa that our former housing minister bought. If you actually believe that, then yes, it result in more supply. But there was a family that wanted to buy it. They just got outbid. So anyhow, yeah, I do think the market's more vulnerable to your point. And I think when we talk about what makes it break, it's yeah, unemployment and like just this long period of flat prices, people bleeding cash, and they just throw in the towel. I mean, I don't know. Steve, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, that speculative fever, though, ultimately sort of sowed the seeds for what we have today, which is the oversupply, right? It's like the boom, the bust. And, all these people. I mean, John, I think at one point in 2021, I think national house prices increased at, this is per the HPI. I think they increased 27%. I mean, it was an
Yeah.
all-time record high. So, that level of price growth, of course, attracted a whole bunch of speculation, which kind of just fed on itself. And I think developers then obviously rushed to meet that demand. And, here we are today, which is we're the hangover period and now the excess supply, which I think that excess supply will linger for several years. And to the point of, yeah, I just think that that's kind of curing a lot of that. It's kind of I think it just cleanses itself, honestly. I mean, is what we're seeing today. Is I don't think anybody today wants to get even remotely close to a pre-sale condo, as we're seeing in the numbers from Altus Group, which is what 105 condo sales in all of the GTA for the month of April. I mean, that industry is on life support. And it's the same story here in Vancouver. I'll give it the data from Altus Group. So in Q1 in Vancouver, in Greater Vancouver, we sold 816 new condo sales in Q1 of 2025. That's down from the bull market of Q1 2022, where we sold 5,200 units. So it
Wow.
dropped 84%.
That's crazy.
And that's not 1 month, that's an
Yeah.
entire quarter. So, and what I'm seeing is it's not getting better, it's getting
Mhm.
worse.
Mhm.
So, I think what's going to happen is we're seeing land development sites are repricing as well. Down anywhere from 25 to call it 40% in many cases. So because the numbers don't work today, everyone got way too far ahead of themselves. Right, John? I mean, everyone's happy to pay 15% above resale pricing for a unit that's going to be built in 3 years, because if the market continues to run 10% a year, you're going to look like a good, it's going to look like a good investment. And I think developers started making land acquisitions and writing up pro formas based on these optimistic numbers. And now you have a situation where those numbers haven't materialized. In fact, the resale market's not going up, it's declining. And so the gap between new construction and resale is actually getting wider. It's not shrinking, it's getting wider. And so I don't see how any developer can launch into this market unless you have to close that gap.
Yeah, 100%.
And I just think it's going to take years to close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
But Steve, the government is not content to let the market just cleanse itself out. Surprise, surprise.
Well,
Fed-
I'll say this. I'm kind of surprised. Well, I mean, it's probably too early to cast judgment, but like if you look at like Mark Carney's GST program,
which we're going to turn to.
Okay, so I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but it just removed GST for first-time home buyers, didn't remove it for the investors, and investors in Vancouver anyways are about 70% of resale units are investors, so they're not eligible, number one. Number two, it's post-dated to, it has to be a new contract as of May 27th, 2025. So anyone that bought resales, the 5,000 units in Q1 of 2022, they aren't eligible for that savings. And so I just think, it's not going to help. I'm surprised that the government hasn't actually come in, because usually they're so used to coming in. I'm not advocating for them to come in. They need to just leave the market. But they haven't come in yet with any goodies to sort of bail this thing out.
Is Banker Carney a bit different? Now, Steve, this actually put up a little bit of a debate that I wanted you and John to get into. So I put up your tweet while you were speaking there. Just the observation you did make, and I'm going to clarify that the Canadian government has removed HST GST on new homes up to 1.5 million for all first-time home buyers. However, the contract must have been signed by May 27th, 2025 onwards. In other words, no GST relief for existing pre-sale homes buyers waiting to close. So, Steve, I'm going to push back on you. Do you think more buyers this program should be expanded and more buyers should benefit from it? Because that means more cost to the taxpayer.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating for it. I mean, I think that we kind of have to leave the market to its own devices. I mean, obviously, my personal philosophy is, and I agree with John to an extent, which is to say that, lowering or raising development charges isn't the reason why we're in the situation we're in today. It certainly hasn't helped. I think that, when you have the cost of a new home is 20% of that cost is development charges, fees, taxes, I think is outrageous. I think people should be very, very upset, but it's not why we're in the situation today. And I don't think we should roll back. Like I think realistically, if you're a pre-sale investor and you speculated in Q1 2022 or Q4 of 21, like you shouldn't get a retroactive GST 5% discount, especially given where the budget is today.
But the best is the builders are advocating for it to be retroactive, but not so that this rebate flows through to home buyers. I mean, they just want
so
it.
They can close.
Well, no, they don't want it so they close, because I mean, maybe that would make sense if it flows through to buyers. The price is lower, maybe they can close. But it looks like they actually just want it to kind of pad their profits, basically. It's like they have like $50,000 less per unit that they got to pay the government HST on. So now all of a sudden their projects have become considerably more profitable because they were supposed to pay HST. Now they don't have to pay HST. And that's kind of what it looks like they're trying to do, which seems a little bit.
But wouldn't they have already pre-sold those units? So how does that work?
Well, they've pre-sold those units. So they
got to close.
Expected to pay HST on those, right? But the builders are basically saying, well, why don't we just apply the rebate to these existing ones? And that tax benefit flows through to the builder, not the unit owner, right? It doesn't flow through in the form of lower prices. Like imagine this way, you bought $1 million unit, okay? Pre-construction 2 years ago. Let's just say that rebate means you save $50,000 on your unit. Does that mean on closing you're going to be paying $950 rather than $1 million? I
No,
don't
but I
think
mean,
so.
I'm saving having to pay the 50 to the government.
No, I don't think you do. I think you still end up paying $1 million. I think the builder pays 50 less to the government. Because the builder, when you buy a pre-construction condo, they get your rebate. Like the price you, and I don't know. That's what
I
it
don't know.
seems like.
All I know is in BC, when I go to the closing table, if I've bought a 2-bedroom condo for $1 million, when I go to the closing table, my lawyer is going to say, okay, well, Steve, bring in a check for $1,050,000 because I got to pay out the BC government or the federal government their 5% GST. So it gets
Oh,
remitted directly
that's
from the lawyer.
interesting. So here it's different. The price includes the GST or HST.
And they remit it for you?
Yeah, they remit it for you. And the builder basically gets whatever you're entitled to as the HST rebate.
Oh,
Right.
interesting. Yeah,
So
no. So
anyhow,
I think to my understanding on the Carney thing with first time home buyers, my understanding is that the buyer, if they are eligible moving forward, they will still pay the GST and then they'll have to apply for a credit. So they'll have to apply for a rebate or a
after the
refund
fact.
after the fact. Because I think obviously it makes sense because I think what the government wants to see is like we got to verify you're a first time home buyer and you're actually going to live in the unit for 12 months.
Yeah.
Before you apply, right? Because otherwise everyone will be like, well, I'm a first time home buyer, and then immediately they're turning around and renting it out.
Okay, but if they're doing that verification, then, the issue that I have with a lot of these housing advocates are like, we should make it apply to basically every owner occupier, right? But the problem is, technically, that's the system we have today. Everyone who applies for the rebate that's buying a 400 square foot condo as an investor is an owner occupier, quote unquote, on closing, so they can get their rebate and then starts renting it. So, if they're going through the process of verifying it's a principal residence or something like that, then yeah, maybe it would be worthwhile extending it. But otherwise, we have the same
I'm going
problem.
to interject a bit here just to
Interject.
make sure our viewers are following some of the nuances that you're discussing.
Thank you,
So,
Urmi.
John, I did put up your tweet about Mark Carney's proposal, which is right now limited, as Steve notes, to first-time buyers and to those buying only past a certain date. And you argued that this might be right sizing of this initiative because there's a big difference between policies that help end users afford a home and policies that protect speculative profits. We need to decide which problem we're really trying to solve. And you're responding to the Build, which is the Building Industries Association lobby group, issuing an open letter to Mark Carney on GST rebate commitments, asking him to expand the program. Now, I think what's interesting here is a couple things. One, expanding the program would cost the federal government more.
Mm-hmm.
We pay the taxes. We're worried about our deficit. Who should we be helping here? And I think this is the big confusion for us. In Ontario, at least, the way the system operates is GST rebates are kind of used not so that buyers pay them out of pocket, get the money back, because most buyers can't do it. Like that's why they're there. It's to make that transaction more possible. And that's why I think in Ontario we see the regime that we have because it encourages them to just go ahead and not worry about it, and they are expecting their price to be knocked off. But does it get knocked off? And that's John's point. Now, it may be, Steve, in different provinces, it operates differently, and that would be a very good incentive. But my question to you is, as I go back to that scenario of 1990s where some people get underwater, then you could feel for them because it was a recession that hit everyone. And this issue now where we have a mix of end users and investors caught, who should we be helping? Should we be expanding this to first-time buyers who bought before May 17th?
Listen, I mean, this may not be popular with some people, but I don't think it should be applying to people who bought before May 27th or whatever it is, 2025. Like at the end of the day, they introduce,
I don't disagree with you, John.
you know what I mean? Like they introduce a new tax rebate going forward. You know, the government cuts GST tomorrow to zero. I can't go back with all of my receipts over the past 2 years and try to get that money back. It doesn't work like that. You know, and I get it. It sucks because you bought and you paid a higher price, but I mean, that's the world we're in.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think what I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on is I mean, there's two trains of thoughts here. So yeah, again, some people say, well, it should it just be for first time home buyers, or it should be for everybody, including investors moving forward. And I guess there's really like a philosophical argument here, because like, I think what we can argue is that young first time home buyers are disadvantaged compared to the investor who obviously benefited from zero rates and have accumulated multiple properties. And so if you want to give a first time home buyer a leg up, you give them at least somewhat of a competitive advantage to say, hey, listen, you don't have to pay 5% GST on new construction. The other argument is from the development community, of course, which says, well, if we lower the prices for everybody, then more supply will get built, and it will result in excess supply and lower prices across the board. And so I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer here. It's kind of just like your philosophical view on economics, and I don't know if we'll ever know.
I think there is a right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the right answer is the former. Like, listen, I think the building community, the YIMBY economists, whatever, they'll say it should apply to everybody. Because, and this is the argument, first-time buyers only make up a small segment of the new housing market. But they only make up a small segment because every investor bid them so high, especially condos, that the average home buyer couldn't rationalize paying $1,500 a square foot for a pre-construction condo when existing units across the street were selling for $1,100 a square foot. Like, it was fueled by speculation. Like, it's not because young people don't want to buy a home, and especially in the suburbs. Like, this is the important question.
John, the only thing I'd argue back is that I don't think first time. I think there's a huge chunk of first time home buyers. Obviously, as a first time home buyer, you're typically going to live in the unit. I don't think most of them want to buy a floor plan and not be able to sort of walk around, feel it out, and then wait 4 years for delivery.
Okay,
that's the only thing I would argue.
I mean, potentially,
Families used to do that, though.
People used to.
I don't know if you remember, but that's how my family upgraded in the 1990s.
Was that mostly single family though?
Yes.
Okay, that's single family. That's different because that's like a 1 year construction cycle.
Yeah, like a 1 year construction.
No, it wasn't it wasn't a 1 year. We would visit the site. I remember, like, over, it wasn't fast. We would go and visit the site, and many families around us were kind of in a similar thing. I don't think the building process was as fast as we're thinking.
Sure. Okay. So condos are going to be dead regardless. Okay. We've got a lot of purpose-built construction. Do we need to subsidize our politicians, like our former housing minister, loading up his and I'm picking on him. At the end of the day, it's a generational thing. I mean, he's just easy to pick on because he's a former.
He's not there anymore.
I mean, former, but do they need a tax subsidy to buy more investment properties? And my feeling is no. Why would we? Especially low-rise homes, like, which is the stock we're not building, which is the stock that you need for the next generation. Why are we going to be subsidizing them to be buying more? That doesn't make sense to me.
I think, Steve, I want to push back a little, because I think we often think consumer behavior is dictating the builders, and we're not often conscious about how they're shaping our behaviors. Going back to the 1990s, there were a tremendous period where me and all my family friends around me, and we're in Toronto in the original homes that my parents and their parents could afford when we got here. And they were very small and very modest, and we lived in them for years. We did not upsize even when people needed the room. Other relatives would move in. Like, I think we all remember that. Then there became a stage where the expansion of the suburbs and the new builds were huge. And they really built out Toronto. I think we forget that the Toronto area, Richmond Hill, Markham, Stouffville, a lot of these areas were not in play in big numbers. They are now the juggernaut of the single family home engine of the Toronto area, right? When you think of the number of homes that there are for sale as compared to downtown Toronto. So I think one thing I just like to push back on is, in that era, consumers had to get used to a certain reality. Mm-hmm. They bought these homes on spec. They waited. I remember my parents, because they're from Asia, did a little prayer ceremony every few They would go there and just lay flowers to just make sure that nothing went wrong with this new construction.
Freaks would
You
do
know,
that.
would they do that? Your
Probably,
parents would do
probably
something
would.
different? Yes. So I think I'm just trying to push back a little that we are buying into the building industry arguments that no one is going to be there to take up the slack. But my question to you, both of you now, is what happens if Carney holds the line and doesn't expand it? What happens now that that investor portion's out and there's no
Well,
support?
I mean that was good segue because I was actually curious to ask John's opinion. Like, I think one thing that I'm really thinking about here is obviously it's been boom times in that development community, right? For the last 5-10 years. You've got a record number of units under construction. I think getting close to near completions, record completions. And housing starts are just like collapsing, right? I mean, 105 condo sales in the GTA. I mean, is the writing on the wall? I'm just kind of curious what happens to that construction community or sector 18 months from now.
It's a great question. And like I said, the HST or GST has zero impact on new condo sales. Like the gap is so big, that alone is not enough. Will it impact low rise a little bit? Maybe. And I don't know what's going to happen. Like at the end of the day, in theory, we should see more of them converting their condos potentially to purpose-built rental, but rent prices are trending down. Like it's not, you know what I mean? Like the environment, you have to be very bullish to be putting cash down. The numbers were hard to, make like work for builders when rents were high. Now we've dropped 10, 12%. And it's a lot harder. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's a very good question. And the rental market is puzzling for me why it's as soft as it is. And what I mean by that is, I think maybe we talked about this on another show, like when the resale housing market is dead, like sales at like 20, 30-year lows. I mean, usually that flows through to much higher demand for rentals, right?
But John, isn't that because that Ponzi scheme of a hockey stick rise in temporary workers and foreign students for really ludicrous degrees under the former Liberal government has just been removed?
I mean, I don't know. I'm seeing mixed data. I mean, I don't know, like, that we're down a
Yeah.
little, but we're not like to zero. I don't know, Steve, have you seen kind of numbers on non-permanent?
Yeah, I was actually meaning to chat with our friend Ben there on some of the data just to parse through it because I don't necessarily understand all the nuances of how they calculate and are we, again, I think we're having issues monitoring outflows of a lot of these individuals. So I'd be kind of curious. I'm not the expert on that side, but yeah, I mean, I know my thought process is that if I'm a policymaker, I'd be what would keep me up at night is what's happening in the construction sector because it's 8% of the workforce in Canada.
Exactly.
So then maybe there's another explanation. We have to factor in the historical rebound in purpose-built rentals that are being completed. Do you think that's taking a segment out of that investor-led condo, I'll rent it out model?
I think that's gonna kill a lot of the investor demand for a little while, like when rentals are flooding the market.
And is that enough for the construction industry to pivot to and keep them somewhat sound?
Debatable. I mean, I think Carney will probably keep CMHC program in place for that rental financing. I know. I just look at it from like if I'm a provincial government or a municipal government, both of them are starving for tax revenues. And I think when you've killed, I mean, the golden goose is basically dead, right? Which is real estate. Everyone's become so addicted to the revenues of that, to which we talked about earlier. 20% of the cost of a new home is government fees. The only reason why, in my opinion, it got to 20% was because it was a bull market and they could just keep layering on more fees and more fees. And because the buyers are willing to pay ever higher prices, the developers could continue to
But can
keep
I
selling
push
them.
back on you both on that? Did municipalities ride that wave from the beginning, or did they come late to the table? It's
No,
almost
they've been riding it for a long
were
time.
they?
I think
Okay.
so. In the GTA
Mhm.
specifically,
I think they went up way more rapidly over the past 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, but they've 10x. So development fees have 10x since 2010.
Yeah.
But rapidly in the last few years.
I think more rapidly in the last few years. Yeah.
Because and in Toronto, that makes a material difference because we had a lot of condos come on board. And
it was kind of like 20, I'm looking at the chart now, it was kind of like 2017, 2018. They just went like parabolic.
Yeah. Kind of when everyone started speculating. I seriously think they just thought, oh, vice tax. They're gambling. It's like cigarettes.
Totally. But if you're like if you're a city government now and you're like, well, we're really hurting for revenues and we can't, it's politically very difficult to continue to raise people's property taxes every year. I think you're going to have to look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to cut my development charges. Either I can leave the development charges and fees as is and basically get nothing because nothing is really going to get built in this environment, or I can cut them in half, which will save maybe, call it 5 to 7% of the cost of a new home and make new housing at least slightly more. And you'll take a smaller chunk of what you used to, but it's better than zero.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So to finish this off, it looks like Carney himself, he may be a banker, he may be used to working in Finance Canada and Bank of England and Bank of Canada, where people bring you these papers and you make decisions. But he is now the head of a government where it doesn't even look like all his cabinet ministers agree. If he does nothing, how will he meet the new housing minister? And I'm putting his picture up here. The new housing minister's pledge that home prices shouldn't fall. How's he going to do that?
I mean, it's honestly such a ridiculous thing to say. This is like housing 101. You know what I mean? Like, it's so obvious that would be controversial. It's like mind-blowing that he would even say that on his first day of the job as housing. And for those people who missed it, I think it was, what's his name? Gregor Robertson?
Yes, yeah, and we're going to get some intel from Steve, former mayor of Vancouver.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of mentioned, I think first day on the job, someone asked him if house prices need to fall, and his answer is basically no, which is what Trudeau said, I think, a year ago, right?
Rumors are in Ottawa, I was there over the weekend, that Carney's getting really frustrated with this because now he's a politician, right? And it's so different than all your deputy ministers and everyone staying in line. And, just so apparently there is a little bit of an issue there. I mean, he's very used to controlling staff in a very different environment. Steve, over to you on that comment and just whether you have any more intel for us on Gregor Robertson.
Not particularly. I mean, obviously, I think the big, my guess is why he was brought in to be housing minister is that he understands the municipal side of the balance sheet probably better than most people do. And I think that's an area where it's getting a lot of publicity these days and they're going to continue to attack it. So, and that's why I said, I think irregardless, I think if you're looking at the construction sector and saying, oh my God, like this, I think it's a crisis. I mean, to have a 30-year low in new home sales, I think this is setting itself up to be a real problem. Because like John, like if you lose, like if you have like a highly skilled plumber or electrician or engineer, and you say, well, we got nothing to build for you, go find another job. It's not just easy just to pick a different career path. You need to keep these people employed. And so I think the writing is on the wall, which is housing starts are lagging in an incredible fashion, that there's going to be very little built in Canada's two largest major metros over the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, let's keep watching whether Carney's play to turn all that labor over to major infrastructure projects comes to pass. I think that's one of the thinking there, but you're right.
I think 8% of the labor force is employed in construction. I think about 4% of that is employed directly in residential construction.
Right. And
so I'm not sure how well that translates.
It does, and it'll take time. And it seems to be on the surface a play. They're not connecting the dots very well, but there's this huge, large infrastructure push across Canada. But you're right. We'll see whether that comes to pass. Unless there's any more thoughts on the politics right now, I want to get back to your industry because a lot of people are still very excited about real estate.
Mhm.
Even though it is so hard and such a grind for all of you, the interest in real estate never ends. The questions about what agents are doing and how listings work. Steve, I think you said something that kind of was very interesting when you said recently that realtors are turning down listings. Some are even adding clauses for reimbursement of marketing expenses if sellers terminate listings early. Unrealistic sellers are unprofitable business. Steve, I think you'll get a lot of people interested in that, what you said.
Yeah. I mean, I think right now, I don't care who you talk to in the industry, people that have been around for 5 years or 25 years, I think they're all telling you this is the worst they've seen it in a long time. And so um I think it's kind of survival mode right now. And so yeah, if you're looking at, I've, friends with all the top producers in the city here, and like you look at some of the guys that are carrying, 20, 30 listings, and it's like, well, it's a couple $1,000 a listing, right? Times that by 30. And if none of them are moving, or very few of them are moving, and then you've got overhead of compliance, staff, it's just not profitable. And so you have to have sellers that are willing to adjust to the market, which is to say, you listen, you're not necessarily going to like the price, but like if you want to sell, this is what it is. And so I think the issue people are having is like, well, we're putting it on the market for 2 or 3 months. We're bringing them maybe one, maybe two offers. Yeah, they're a bit light, but like, so well, let's just take it off, and we'll try again when the market's better in 3 months. Or we'll rent it out and for a year, and we'll test the market a year from now. Well, it's like, well, that's not necessarily a guarantee that that business is coming back to you, right? Take it off the market 3 months later, you go hire someone else. You're like, okay, great. I just spent, a couple $1,000 and 30 hours of my time.
And unpack that more, Steve. It's people can understand that there's the overhead of a brokerage, but it's more than that, right? For every listing, agents are doing a lot of the work to keep those listings on the market and being
Yeah.
marketed.
Yeah, totally.
And
Your
that's
service.
coming out of their pocket with the idea that this will be reimbursed. Now, in a really, really slow market like this, things get fraught. Things break down, right? People start changing listing agents, keep
Yeah.
thinking that
Oh, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the agent that's the reason they're not able to sell. So
Yeah.
maybe unpack that a little bit in the
Oh,
dynamic
100%.
of
So
this.
like kind of the running joke is almost like I say is basically you're almost better off to be second in, which is to say that let the first realtor go in, let him sign up the listing, or she let her sign up the listing for 3 months at, whatever, $2 million. And because the seller's expectations are always higher out of the gate, and let them basically get fired after 3 months, and let you come in as a second agent and say, okay, listen, Mrs. Home Seller, you're not $2 million. You tried that for 3 months with so and so agent. How about we try 1.9? And and they're usually more open to that, because again, they've been softened up over the first 3 months with somebody else. And so this sort of I think it's just like the cycle. John would know. I think it's the psychological element of home sellers. Everybody anchors to where they think they should be. And, well, let's just try this number. And what they end up doing is they just burn time on the market, which ultimately actually ends up hurting you over the long run.
And John, in the GTA, how many of these agents then pick up all the staging and photos that are already there that the
Oh yeah.
first agent invested in, and now the second agent's just coming in and doing the price adjustment that actually meets the market reality?
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's happening actually with condos is that, I mean, I'm finding a lot of times there isn't a second agent because, a lot of times they'll list them when they're vacant, tenant has moved out, we'll prep it, you'll get it ready, stage it, or virtual stage it, you spend your money, they're not getting the price they want, you spent this time and money. It's like, okay, why don't we just rent it instead and try a year or 2 years from now, to Steve's point, right? Um, and yeah, 100% that's happening. And, we see it in our office, even our own agents are just like reluctant to do that because you're spending 2, 3 grand. And like Steve says, it's the time and the money for a price that is unrealistic. Especially in the condo market where there's such little activity. So yeah, it's a challenging market right now to be taking
So I
listings.
think it's the flip side, right? Because like in the markets that everyone's become accustomed to over the last 5, 10 years has been, well, yeah, it's a little high, but like the market trends higher over months or a year. That like, well, if I can't get them 800 today, I bet you I can probably get them 800 in 2 months. And so like, I think what happens is you tend to find that the market will sort of move in that direction, which I would argue today is moving again in the opposite direction. It's like, well, it's not 800 and it's probably not even 750. And the time that you reduce from 800 to 750, it's now worth 725. And so you have a lot of people that I think are just continuously behind the eight ball. And so what I'm hearing and seeing in conversations is more realtors that are reluctant to say, you know what, we think we're going to pass. You should hire somebody else, or actually discussing and saying, what are your true intentions? Because if your intentions are like, hey, I want to test the market for 2 months and then I'm going to rent it out, I just don't know if that's business worth taking on.
And to be clear, as we wrap up the show, you both are very interested in new business. And this tension is really around a disconnect growing between sellers who are just not able to readjust and realize that our markets are now in a very new reality.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, probably Steve's been in this boat with myself. Like years ago, it's normal to take listings where the seller's a little unrealistic, where their expectations are too high, and you try it. Like we've all done that. And to be honest, sometimes it works. Sometimes just one person just overpays for that property and it works. But again, you do that, and sometimes it works in bull markets when prices are rising, when there's a shortage of homes, where every other home's getting a bidding war, and you've been sitting on the market for 30 days, and people get fed up of competing, so they'll pay a little extra to not compete, right? In this market, no one cares about this overpriced condo. Like no one cares. There's just so many of them. So it doesn't work to be overpriced and unrealistic in a market that is effectively a buyer's market. I think that's the point.
Well, thank you. I'm sure all our viewers and listeners appreciate you bringing the other side of the HGTV love it or listing side, maybe the more Aaron Sorkin, like boiler room realistic view of how the industry has to adjust. And there's no doubt that it's a difficult time for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of real professionals and companies caught up in this right now. So
Sure.
I'm sure
No need to shed a tear for us. We'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Exactly. We don't.
Yes, I think we should be clear on that as well. It's the consumers, most of all, that we really need to be thinking about. So thank you, both of you, and we will resume next month. It'll be very interesting to see what these numbers look like and whether, as both of you are predicting, these flatter conditions remain.